You're 63, you've got a little over $1 million saved. Most of it is in your 401k at work. Some is in a Roth IRA, and there's a little bit in a joint account with your spouse. 2 years ago, you felt great about where things were heading. You were on track for 1.2 million by 65, right on schedule. Then the market started moving, and the global news right now is not helping. Now, you're wondering whether the plan you built still means what you thought it meant. If any of that situation feels familiar, this episode is built around your situation specifically. You, 63 years old, 2 years out from retirement, watching a portfolio that has done a lot of the right things, but now it's getting jostled by a market that doesn't care about your timeline and a global news cycle that isn't exactly settling anyone's nerves. Volatility at 63 feels different than volatility at 43. And it's supposed to. The stakes are different. The timeline is shorter, and the paycheck that used to cushion every dip is almost out of the picture. That heightened awareness isn't weakness, it's appropriate. The question isn't whether to take it seriously. The question is what to actually do with it. And that's a different question than most people are asking when they go looking for the answers. Here's where we're headed. We'll start with what volatility actually is, because the word gets used constantly as a synonym for bad markets, and that's not quite accurate. Then we'll talk about sequence of returns risk. That's the specific reason volatility at 63 deserves more attention than volatility when you're 43. We'll get honest about the behavioral side of things. What is your brain wired to do right now? And why might that instinct carry more risk than the market drop itself? We'll talk about what a well-structured retirement plan is actually designed to do when markets get rough. And we'll get into the question you're probably already sitting with. Should you push retirement back? Should you go to cash? Should you do something to change the situation? By the end of this, you should have a clear sense of whether what you're feeling is a signal to act or a signal to stay anchored. So let's start with the word itself, volatility. Simply means movement. It's a measure of how much and how quickly the value of an investment changes, up or down. High volatility means bigger swings in both directions. Low volatility means smoother movement. Volatility is not the same thing as a permanent loss. A volatile market may drop sharply and may also recover sharply. Those are not the same thing as losing money permanently or losing money instantly. The damage may become permanent only if you make decisions during the drop that lock in the decline. Think of it like turbulence on a flight. Turbulence is uncomfortable. It spills your coffee. It may trigger some real anxiety, but turbulence doesn't bring the plane down. It's just the atmosphere doing what the atmosphere does. The problem isn't the turbulence itself. The problem is what a passenger might decide to do in the middle of it. Now, here's where your situation gets specific. You have money spread across 3 different tax buckets. Your 401k is the largest at $750,000, maybe $800,000, and some of it is in mutual funds or ETFs that have performed well for several years. You may not fully understand every fund in there, but the numbers, well, they look good. Your Roth has about $100,000 in it, and your joint brokerage account, known also as a taxable account or just a straight up investment account, has maybe $150,000 in it. Each of those buckets may behave differently in a volatile market. Each is taxed differently, and each plays a different role in what your retirement income could look like at 65. Now, here is why sequence of returns risk is the real villain. It's not volatility. It's sequence of returns risk. This is the concept that changes the conversation for someone in your position. And it doesn't get talked about nearly enough outside of actual planning conversations. Sequence of returns risk is the idea that the order of market returns matters when you're actively withdrawing the money. Not just the average return over time, the order of those returns. If you get bad returns early in retirement and then get better returns later, that has a different effect than if you have good returns early in retirement and then get bad returns later on. 2 people can retire with the same amount of money, experience the same average market return over 20 years, and end up in very different financial positions. The difference isn't the average, it's when the bad years happened. If you retire in a down market and you're pulling income from your portfolio at the same time, then you may be selling shares at lower prices to meet the same income need. Those shares aren't there to participate in the recovery. The portfolio may shrink faster than the math had suggested previously and could have less to work with when conditions begin to improve in the markets. This is why the first few years of retirement may be the most financially sensitive years of the entire retirement period. You're close enough that a significant drop now, particularly if it persists into the first year or two of your retirement, could affect the trajectory in ways worth thinking through before they arrive. So let's talk about what your brain is actually doing during these periods of decline. We've all heard of fight or flight, and that is the instinct that moves us to want to take action. And so when you are 62, 63, 64, the age doesn't even matter necessarily, but when you are very close to retirement or you have just recently retired, that feeling of seeing a significant drop can make us want to react. What you feel when you check on your account and see that it's dropped 5, 10, 15% in the matter of weeks, that feeling of anxiety is what's going to drive you to want to make some kind of change. You feel like you have to do something. It's a fight or flight reaction. Now, when we check our account and we see that it's declined, that ping sort of pain is the feeling of loss aversion. And we feel it almost twice as painfully as any good thing that we've seen in our account. It's just normal for us to want to deviate or run away from losses or the potential for losses. Again, it's biological. It's something that's just ingrained inside of our bodies to run from the pain, to run from the loss. The shift when you're close to retirement is that the portfolio has stopped feeling like future money way out there, something you're not going to touch. And it starts feeling like that thing that has to be there to work for you. You have no time to recoup any losses. And I've got to tell you, I've seen it time and time again. People who, when they hear something on the news, immediately reach out because they want to know whether or not they should do something, or if I have a recommendation for them to do something. And generally, what I will say to them is something to the effect of, we built the portfolio in a way that we don't have to have a crystal ball. We built it in a way that is diversified, intended to manage some of the risks and by and large reduce some of the volatility that's being seen out there in the news. It's not going to guarantee against loss, but it is designed for the ups and downs. And I have had clients who, they came in with their concerns. They listened to what I had to say and the guidance that I gave. And then they said, no, this time it's different. This time I need to make a change. And I can think of a handful of clients where, against the advice that I was giving, they did make a change. And unfortunately, those are the clients who have performed the worst. When we look at growth of the portfolio, they lock in losses, usually at the worst possible time. And then when they do that, I have to say, okay, well, if you are saying this is the time to get out, I kind of have to rely on you to tell me when is the best time to get in. When are you feeling like it's the right time? And 100% of the time, that feeling of when it's right to get back in is when the market has already seen gains beyond where the losses started, reaching all new highs before somebody calls and says, hey, do you think it's time to get back in? Things look pretty good. Yes, things look great. And also, you are still sitting at negative 20% return, and now you want to jump in when the market's up 30%. That's a really hard conversation to have. Obviously, I try to be very tactful about it, but the guidance we give is based on years of experience. It's based on working with hundreds of clients, and it's based on researching the data. There's just so much data out there. You can't deny the data. Now, do we have black swan events that cause the market to go sideways and drop 50%? Yes, those events do happen. But so far, historically, we have always recovered from those events. And that is why I strongly believe in a diversified portfolio, not putting all your eggs in one specific asset basket or one specific company stock that you believe is going to be the company that just lasts over the next 50 years. We don't place bets like that. I recommend against them because when it comes to retirement planning, we want to be prudent, we want to be diversified, we want to manage the risk and still see growth. There's irony in wanting to move to cash or bonds in order to reduce the risk. You see, all you're really doing is trading one risk for another. You're trading the volatility and that risk of loss for opportunity risk, the risk that you are going to miss out on growth when the market recovers. There's also inflation risk. If you just put your money in cash and it's not earning anything, then inflation is eroding your purchasing power. I could argue that you may not like feeling the ups and downs of the portfolio movement, especially when you're close to retirement, especially when you're drawing on that money in retirement. But that risk looks different than the risks presented by going to cash and not having that money work and grow for you as you are drawing on it, or having it sit in cash and have its buying power essentially being eroded away at 3% per year. I would take the risk of volatility any day, and I will take the risk of volatility when I reach retirement age because I know how important it is to have that growth potential built into my investments because it helps to ensure that my money is going to last longer than me in retirement. Oftentimes, it's not the market decline that breaks a retirement plan. The decision made during that decline is what did. A well-constructed retirement plan doesn't promise that markets won't be volatile. What it can do is account for volatility in advance so that a rough stretch doesn't force a decision that wasn't part of the strategy in the first place. One of the ways we do this is through income guardrails. Maybe you've heard of this. Guardrails create a pre-agreed framework for how income may adjust based on what's happening with the portfolio over time. Think of it as two fences around your retirement spending, an upper fence and a lower fence. When the portfolio crosses a meaningful threshold, say a 15% decline from the starting value, the income can or may be reduced temporarily by a predetermined amount, say 10% of the distribution. It's not permanent, it doesn't have to be dramatic, it's just enough to reduce some of the strain while the portfolio has declined and has time to recover. That word temporarily matters. A guardrail adjustment isn't a punishment. You shouldn't feel like you're being punished for markets declining. It's a pressure release valve, though. Think of it that way, because it's pre-planned rather than reactive. Now, pre-planned means you have to pre-plan for having that pinch in the budget temporarily. So if we're talking about reducing by, say, 10% the income distributions from the portfolio, then you have to have room in your budget to be able to reduce by 10%. And so this is part of the strategy, pre-planning what you can do in order to turn on, again, that pressure release valve. And having that pressure release valve may sidestep the emotional decision-making that causes the most long-term damage. There's also the structural piece. Your joint brokerage account, remember that $150,000 that you have, could function as a near-term income buffer in early retirement. If your spending can be funded from a more stable source for a period of time, the growth-oriented portion of your portfolio may have room to recover before you need to draw on it. A plan designed only for calm markets, only for upward climbing markets, isn't really a retirement plan. It may be just a best case scenario. And best case scenarios have a very poor track record of describing real retirement situations. So, should you delay retirement because of market volatility or do something to change something? This is a real question. But in my experience, there's an underlying question that's sitting there. It's usually, do I even have a plan? Or it's, is my plan broken? And then when you get to the base of it, am I just scared right now? The situation dictates what the answer is, and which one of those questions is really the question that you're asking. Different problems have different answers. If you're feeling concern, if you're feeling anxiety about what is going on in the world today, maybe what you should be thinking about is how best to stress test your portfolio and your retirement plans. Stress testing can help you identify areas where maybe your retirement plan needs some improvement. For example, if the market drops 20%, how much of your portfolio is likely to be impacted by that? Sometimes working with a financial advisor can help you to hone in on how much exposure you have to what you're seeing out there in the world. The other side of that is, if the market declines 20% and or if your portfolio declines, say 20%, will your plan still hold up? Do you have some sort of backstop built into this plan so that you can weather these types of storms? Whether that backstop is reducing the distribution that you're taking, the withdrawals, the income, or if it is having a cash reserve pool inside of your retirement accounts so that when markets decline a lot, you have the ability to, instead of selling those investments that have lost value, move over and start drawing from a cash reserve pool. What we like to do with clients is build 3 to 4 years of cash, not specifically in a cash holding, but in some kind of cash-like investment that's still earning interest, so that if and when markets decline a lot, because they do that from time to time, we know that we no longer have to sell our investments for a loss at this point. We can move over and start selling from this cash reserve pool. We can start drawing the income from the reserve and wait for the markets to recover, wait for the different investments that we're holding to recover in value before we transition back over to selling some of those to create the income. Now, I am completely aware that people have different things going on in life. Sometimes we just feel like we don't have the time to get to some of these more important parts of our lives that help us have a foundation going forward. There is a personal cost to delaying the planning process, to delaying figuring out how to do the things you need to do to set up these backstops, these backup plans, these reserve pools, and things like that. 2 more years of delaying is going to cost you time and energy and health and potentially relationships, because as long as you don't have a plan that you feel confident in, you are going to feel anxiety every time the market drops between now and retirement and even into retirement. If you are considering delaying retirement, is a real decision that comes with real costs. Now, it may be the right call. Maybe because of how the markets have reacted, you just know that you are not in the right place to be able to retire confidently in 2 years. If that is the case, then that may be the right call for you. But it should come down to the math, not this specific moment in time. So let's talk a little bit about what it looks like when markets get rough and clients are coming into the office. I think it's great to have perspective on what some advisors are doing in those conversations with clients. I think it's very important when clients come in to make sure that I'm aware of any stresses that they're feeling, anything that they're seeing on TV that might be bothering them, really just getting to the heart of what are their concerns when they come in. I can have a whole agenda, but my agenda does not matter when somebody comes in with something extremely pressing on their mind and they're just waiting to find that right opportunity to get it out. And so I like to start every meeting with giving them that opportunity to get it off their chest, put it out there on the table so that we can address it. Oftentimes when things are a little crazy like they are right now, whether it's administrative policies, just the media hype around things, the global tensions, whenever this stuff is surfacing, clients come in with a little bit of anxiety, and rightfully so. I can say with confidence and a lot of certainty that we have not had clients come in and find out that, yes, things are just as bad in their portfolios as they were seeing on TV. Any clients where we have planned through this prior to all of this stuff happening, plan in advance before retirement, those clients come in with anxiety and they leave with confidence. Save those few clients that said, yes, I hear you. Thank you for your guidance. Please move my money to cash. Aside from those situations that do come up from time to time, most clients leave feeling better and more confident about what's going on with their money and their retirement savings. The clients who feel the least anxious aren't the ones with the most money. They're the ones with the clearest structure. They have a plan and they know what that plan is. And we're just there to reiterate that plan. So part of my job, I believe, is not only trying to calm the emotional side of things, but also to just review the plans that we put in place, highlight, hey, we already expected this to happen, and here's what we had set up so that if it did happen, you'd be ready for it. We're not trying to manage the emotions because everybody's emotions are 100% valid. I don't believe I can actually manage anyone's emotions. I have a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old, and I am the least equipped to be handling other people's emotions. But we can keep an anchor, and that anchor is the plan. And so if we can anchor to that plan and know that we have a plan, regardless of how hard the wind blows and how heavy the storm is, we know that we are going to be in place because of that plan, anchoring us in place. I do believe we can still take some action on this. First, separate the feelings from the question as best you can. Ask yourself honestly, is your concern coming from something specific in the plan that you have? Is that concern coming from the fact that you don't really feel like you have a plan? Or is the concern just coming from the markets and the global headlines? Those questions may require different responses. Second, look at what's actually in your 401k. If you've been in different investments that have performed well, but you can't fully describe what they are or how they might behave in a sustained downturn, that's worth understanding before you're 2 years from needing the money. The third thing that you could do as an action item is stress test the plan that you have, if you have a plan, for a rough first year. Not because it will happen, though Murphy's Law of Retirement says that when you retire, markets will go down, but because knowing how the plan could hold up under pressure may be the thing that keeps you anchored when markets and global events become very unsettled. If you haven't done that, that's probably your starting point. The market is going to do what it does. What you can control is whether the plan that you have was built to handle it, and whether you understand it well enough to stay the course when things get uncomfortable. Volatility at 63 deserves serious attention. Not panic, but genuine, clear-eyed attention. The 2 years between now and retirement may be some of the most important planning years you have left. The goal isn't to predict what the market will do or what tomorrow's headlines are going to say. It's to build a structure so that whatever happens, you're not making major decisions from a place of fear. If this episode was useful, share it with someone who's in a similar season and watching the markets maybe a little too closely right now. And remember, it's not about having the smartest financial advisor, the most money saved, or the highest probability of retirement success, whatever that means. The perfect retirement plan for you is the one you act on.